Thanks for joining us today, Steph.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
I always start with how I know the guest, and we met, I would say very interestingly, because about, I guess, two separate people have been like, you need to meet Steph. And then, it's one of those, we need to meet, and then the connection never happened. And yet we met then later through a Facebook group for podcasters, not at all related to the people who had suggested that we meet, which were Josh Trent and Alessandra Wall, your BFF. But I loved that. I love how Facebook still brought us together. I just thought it was like the universe being like, yeah, everybody thinks you guys should know each other. Here, let's make it happen.
I feel like sometimes you get those when you're running in kind of the same circles. It's inevitable that at some point it will overlap. And yeah, the universe is sending us a strong message.
Yeah, I loved it. And I had heard you on an episode of Wellness Force Radio with Josh Trent. And I had really been moved by a lot of the things you said. And I was like, and I think that was even before anybody had suggested we know each other. And I was like, I would love to know this person. So then you had me on your podcast and we had a great chat. Well, I thought it was a great chat. I love chatting with you.
And so many people to this day still message me and say that podcast really helped me learn, thinking about quitting from a different point of view was so liberating. So I thank you for being on the show because you reached so many people who needed to hear that message.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And then I was like, Steph, well, let's hear about your quit. And you definitely had one. And so we are here to talk about that today. So if you could take us back to when you were a high school science teacher.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. It feels like a million years ago. Right now, it was 8 years ago, so 2011. I was involved in CrossFit, and I really wanted to become a better CrossFit competitor. I knew that physically I had a lot of strength. I was building my skills in the gym, but I also realized that my own mindset was getting in my way. If something didn't go my way, I got really upset. I was really trying to work on the mental aspect of being a good competitor. And I joined a mastermind from a coach here in San Diego. Her name is Dawn Fletcher. And we met through, Google Groups or something, which doesn't even exist anymore. That was a long time ago. But one of the things she had us do was take a look at different aspects of our life outside of competition and how happy we were with those different aspects of our lives. And I had been having some unease at work. And when I did this whole worksheet, I realized, oh no, it's actually my job. It was the thing that I rated the most dissatisfying in my life. And I was in the midst of my marriage breaking up and all sorts of other stuff and uncertainty. And that was the number one thing that I realized wasn't working really well. So then I decided, well, to make it better, because then what do you do with that realization? I'm unhappy. Oh, now I know what I'm unhappy about. What do I do about it?
Yeah.
And I decided logically that the best thing to do would be to switch the environment. At least I thought that was gonna right. You think, okay, well, I'll just change of environment. It's almost like, I hate living in San Diego. Said nobody ever, but I hate living in San Diego. Or I'm feeling like this isn't the place for me. Let me just move somewhere else and see if I feel better. And I'm sure sometimes that helps. But in my case, I decided I would move schools. I would switch where I was working, and that would make things better. And instead, I just realized after I switched schools that I had traded one set of problems for another. And I still didn't feel like I was in the right place in terms of my career, my profession, what I was doing with my life. And so that really kicked off a string of decisions about, well, now what do I do about it? Now I'm really stuck. I can't switch schools again. I'm sort of at this stopping point. And so I started to think really creatively about how I could take my hobby blog and turn it into a business. My first career was teaching. It was my only career. And at that point, I had been in the classroom for a decade.
Wow.
And I had no experience in the business world at all. So I thought, okay, well, I really don't know anything. Is this even viable? And that kind of sets the stage for coming upon the quit. And then it wasn't until 2013 that I actually stepped away. So there was a lot that happened in the meantime. And I don't know if we can maybe get into that or dissect it a little bit more. But yeah, that was the origin of all of that was just this overwhelming sense of I'm not where I'm supposed to be.
Yes. I love that. I'm furiously writing because there are so many things down in that section I want to talk to you about. Okay, you brought up something that I'm not sure we've talked about on the podcast, but I think so many people do this when they realize that there's discomfort or friction or, like you said, dissatisfaction somewhere in their life, is they just up and change what seems like easiest to change, which is often the environment. Like, okay, I'm not happy. I'm going to leave whatever city I'm in. And you made a very good point. I've heard somebody once say this to me. It was about a year ago. I just need to leave San Diego. And I was like, unless you're allergic to sun, nobody needs to leave San Diego. I mean, like, I said, before you do that, and I think this is the point here, is before you make some kind of giant change, because what you said in your own thing is you traded one set of problems for another. And that's what happens if you don't necessarily take a look at the underlying cause of the dissatisfaction, right? If you just kind of generally know it's your job, you don't know whether it's the school or whether it's teaching altogether, or maybe it's the type of student you're teaching. Like maybe you do better at a different age or a different subject. But if you don't stop and really dial down on what's causing the dissatisfaction, then you'll do what you said is, okay, I'm just going to pick one aspect and just change that and maybe that'll do it. Or like I was just talking about with my friend, some people just change everything at once. But what you don't change is you, right? If you go to that new city, you still bring you and all those mindsets that come with you. And I'm sensing from you that that's what you learned in this set of transitions was like, oh, there's something else below this. And then it sounds like you did an actual strategic quit from there because as you realize, okay, no, it's all of teaching. I'm going to start this side thing. And you did the thing where you built up your side business while still staying in your main job, correct?
Absolutely. And in fact, I had started my website formally in September of 2011, which was 1 month before I did this mastermind. So a lot of people assume when they hear my story that you had this big revelation and then you decided you'd start this blog to try to make it into something that eventually you could transition to. And that wasn't actually the sequence of events. I started the blog first, and I had a lot of stuff on my personal blog. I had a mountain biking blog, and I would write about all sorts of stuff. And so my blog actually started in 2009. So I'd been blogging for about 2 years up to that point. But then I decided, again, like when something's a month old, I mean, it's essentially an embryo. I mean, anybody can be excited about something for a month, right?
Yeah.
And you're definitely in that honeymoon excitement phase. And so it wasn't even a thought of maybe I could make this into something that could become big enough that eventually I could quit my job and do this thing. All I committed to doing was doing what I was excited about. And so I, on the weekends, would take pictures on my crappy point and shoot camera and write recipes that were not actually really good, but I really loved it. And so I would write and I would take photos, and I would do that mostly on the weekend. And then maybe during the week, I would use my spare time in the evenings. And I just committed to showing up. And I actually did take a 4-month break. I recently found this out because I went on the Wayback Machine on Google, on the internet, and I found that I had taken a 4-month break. And this was slightly after I started the website or started the blog, and it was because I got injured. I got injured doing CrossFit. It wasn't CrossFit's fault. It was my ego, but I got injured and I had all this free time. And so I went back and said, oh, well, I've got all this free time now. I can put more time and attention into this blog. So I think sometimes, again, people assume like it was just smooth sailing from there. And actually, I blogged for a few months, and then I thought this is a lot of extra work. Had this injury, had to step away, had extra time. So had I have not have gotten injured, maybe we wouldn't be sitting here today having this conversation. I don't know. But I did. I continued to show up and be consistent and probably blog about once a week. And as that grew over time, sort of over the next year or so, I started to realize maybe there is something here. It was something I've always loved to cook. I love the science that's involved in cooking. I'm so interested in nutrition. I mean, my background is biology, human physiology, so that ticked all those boxes there, like super fascinated with the human body, all of that stuff. And it really just became this great outlet for me. More people started asking me, how are you doing this? You know, when you changed your diet and you changed what you ate and you felt better, like what was that like for you? And so I started to realize there was really a groundswell of people who are interested in this. So about 6 months before I decided, so I set a date on the calendar. That was the other thing. So I did that for about a year. So 2011 till sort of late 2012. And then I said, well, I'm still working full time. You know, what am I doing here? You know, I really want to do this. I really want to take a shot at it. So let me set a date. And when you're a teacher, obviously your year revolves around, you know, going back to school and then school ending out for the summer. And so I said, all right, well, am I willing to wait till 2014? Right? Am I willing to wait another year and a half? Or do I have enough underneath me that I could leave in 2013 at the end of the school year? So June of 2013. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And so once I set that date, I had some things that I had to put in order. So I did a holistic nutrition course online. And then by chance, I found out about a program called B School, which is for online business. And I ended up doing B School, which was such a blessing because I had no idea how to take my hobby blog and monetize it and make it into a website. So along the way, I sort of started to set milestones. Right. Milestone June, I need to leave. I'm going to put all my ducks in a row. I need to get some education in the meanwhile to really solidify everything. But I was still really, really terrified. Really, really terrified. And I got to the point where I had to submit a letter to the board, the school board in my district asking for a leave of absence. So I decided to ask for a leave of absence first instead of outright quitting, because to me that felt like it was less scary. But even the ask for the leave of absence, I had to write a letter. I had to talk to my principal and get his blessing. And to this day, I think he tried to fake me out and call my bluff. And he was saying things like, well, the school board, they're really not approving any kind of a leave of absence unless it's for a maternity. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try anyway. So I got his blessing. I wrote the letter and I submitted it. And then I had to wait. And writing that letter and submitting it was really, really scary. And I almost didn't do it because then I thought, well, they're either going to say no outright and that's going to crush my dream. Or if they say yes, then I actually have to go through with it.
Right.
Those kind of levels of like quitting hell, and in a way it was great because it chunked it up. But in another way, every time I got to another level, I was faced with another set of circumstances that I had to make a decision.
Yes.
And that was to me equally as difficult because I had to go through the torture of what's the right answer.
Yeah.
And I think what I've learned through that process is nobody knows what the right answer is.
Yes. So
Right?
true.
It's like the famous Steve Jobs quote, you can only connect the dots looking backwards. And all you can do is make the best decision for you at that time. And no one really knows what's going to happen.
Absolutely.
So I did. I got my leave of absence. I was able to take a year off without pay. And so, again, in that process, I was trying to save up money. So my quit was kind of a semi-quit because I was able to step away. And the letter that I wrote to the board was something to the effect of, we're always telling our students to go for their dreams, to do the thing that they're afraid of, but that they really want. And I basically said, if I don't try for this, then I'm being a hypocrite when I'm talking to them.
I love that.
I don't know if
it's
it was
so good.
but it's what I felt in my heart. And so they said yes. And I had the opportunity to come back a year later if I wanted to. They would essentially find a permanent sub and hold my position without pay, without benefits, for a year. And that was then I had to decide, well, am I going through with it or not? And so I said, okay, I'm going to do this, and hit the ground running, but had no money at all coming in. So I had to think quickly, right? Be light on my feet. And I really said, well, this is your opportunity, and it's either sink or swim, but the ball is in your court now.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I had that first year in business for myself. It was crazy. I learned so much. A lot happened. But then I got back around to June again, 2014, to the decision that I had to make, which was whether or not to formally resign or to go back.
And how did you make that decision?
I had like another level of
your levels of quitting hell are hilarious.
Yes, for sure. So I said, well, I mean, I've done the best I can. So far, a lot of great things have happened. And again, I don't know I can't project 5 years into the future and know if this is the right decision. But right now it feels right. I have momentum behind me. I started making money, all of the things that people worry about. And so I had to write the formal resignation letter. And I remember I drove to the post office, and they have the mailboxes on the outside, on the street, and you drive up. And I remember having that letter and holding it above the slot. Like, am I about to seal my fate here? What is this going to hold for me? And just being so nervous. And I let it go. I let the letter go, and I quit. So that's been almost 6 years.
Wow.
Now to the day that happened.
It's such a great story, Steph. I've never heard this entire story. I was literally on the edge of my seat. Like, what happens next? For the benefit of the listeners, I'm going to break down how many amazing strategic quitting things you did in that story.
Okay.
First off, Steph went and decided, okay, I have a set a quit date. I think that's brilliant. That's a great thing. It's like, your quit date isn't tomorrow. Your quit date is first at the logical end of a school year. It's not like, I want to quit in February, mid-school year. You got to get a sub. You said, no, I'm going to do the right thing, finish out a school year. But then you also took that time to prepare. You said you had to get some money things in order, and then you had to get education in order. You spend that time preparing. And I love that you said that you were just committed to doing things that you were excited about. Because a lot of people are like, how do I find my calling? How do I know what to do as my side gig? You knew it. You're like, I love nutrition. I've had nutrition change my own life. So let me take some pictures of it, share my story, share with others some recipes. You were excited about it. It probably felt much less like a really heavy business work type situation, more like fun and just being in your passion. And then I love the part the most, because so often the thing that gets a little bit overlooked is how you actually make the quit. And yours is so beautiful. Two ways. First off, you set yourself up to possibly go back. So what you were taking was what I tend to call like a mini quit or a trial quit. And that was your year leave of absence. You had that all perfectly worked out. So if it didn't work out, great. You had the security net. You could go back. But then the letter that you wrote is just like pure gold. I always say, just make it about you and not about them. Not like, oh, I dislike this school system and I dislike the kids and you didn't give me a great schedule. Make it 1,000% about you and your dreams. And then you went above and beyond to be like, isn't this what we teach our students? Which is like icing on the cake. So beautiful. Like, how at that point are they going to say no? They're like, nope, we should show your students that they have to stay in this job no matter whether they like it or not. They can't do that. Like hopefully their own values kicked in and said, yeah, especially because you had even been told, this is what's so courageous about this story, is that you were told they're not letting anybody do these. And you're like, I'm doing it anyway. Mm-hmm. And you got it. Like, making the ask. I tell people, like, yes, it is very scary to make asks. If you go into your boss and say, hey, I don't want to work full-time, I want to work part-time. Or I want to commute and work a few days from home. Like, these are not necessarily easy asks. But for your own livelihood and for your own enjoyment and for your own sense of fulfillment in your life, you have to make these asks, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the response to that ask will tell you whether or not you're in a place you need to be. If the superintendent had been like, no, you gotta do this, then that may just tell you, well, this is not the school district for me. They don't really believe in me, my growth as a human. So how is that really where I should be teaching other people about how to be a good human? So love every part of your story. Let's get into, if we can now, some of those fears that you had when you said you were terrified. Your different levels of quitting hell.
Yes. And Wow, there were so many fears. And I have to say that without the support of the people in my life who I knew I could really count on to tell me the real, to be real with me, without those people's support, I don't know if I could have done it because so it sounds like I was being very bold and courageous and like, yes, like hands on my hips, power posing. This is what I want. But internally, I was just stuck in the mental chatter. I was stuck in the what if. I was stuck in the fear of every step of the way. And so I had some very amazing people in my life, friends, family, and I had a really amazing coach who was helping me at the time. And I leaned on all of them. And so my fears were many. The first one was that my colleagues would resent me because I had just moved I had moved away from a school where I had helped to build a really amazing program for our students in the aspect of biotechnology. And so when I originally switched schools, which is kind of the beginning of this quit, I had to walk away from that entire thing that I was the leader of. And I thought these people are going to think that I'm a total jerk. They're, here I am walking out on them. And so my fear was that people were going to resent me and hate me for it. And these were people that I really liked. My colleagues were incredible. They're such wonderful human beings, but I just thought they're going to hate me for putting this in their lap. 6 years later, everything's running fine without me. And better, someone who was better suited to the job was able to step into it. So that was a great opportunity for her. And she's taken it and it's flown. But, again, that's that kind of thing where we're worried about, how will they survive without me? And everybody does perfectly and actually allows a lot of people to develop their own skills. In any case, that was really scary because I thought they're all going to hate me. And then when I left my other school, I'd only been there for 2 years. And again, everybody is going to think that I'm a quitter. They're going to think that I'm a loser. They're going to think that I'm just giving up. They are going to think, everything that I thought everybody was going to think about me, right? They're going to think that I didn't have it in me, that I couldn't hack it, that I'm just a big fat loser. And so that was my biggest fear in terms of what other people would think. I was afraid that my family would think that I had thrown away all of my education because I had earned a master's degree in education in 2007. So not too, you do grad school and then a few years later you're like, nah, actually changed my mind. So in a way I thought, okay, well, I just got a master's degree for nothing. My family's going to think that I'm throwing that all away. And especially because a lot of the narrative from my own family is that you find a stable job, you stay there.
Yeah.
Right. The safe job, and I'm using mega air quotes here. It's the safe thing to do, right? Someone's paying you every 2 weeks. Hallelujah. You get benefits. Fantastic. It's a very stable job. And in 2009, in the state of California and in our school district, we had massive pink slips and layoffs. And the science, if you had a science credential, you were relatively protected from that in our district. But I'm like, some people that I knew lost their jobs just a few years ago. And here I am walking away from this safe, secure job. What, am I nuts? So I had that playing in my mind. I was still paying my student loans from my master's degree. I had that playing in my mind. And my sort of last big thing was that I'm going to spectacularly crash and burn and fail at this new thing that I want to do.
Yes.
Right? People are going to think, oh, well, look what you did. You think you're so smart. Well, you went and you just made a big fool out of yourself. It didn't work. Ha ha. Yeah, you proved yourself right. And that I would end up in debt or, broke. Basically, I would have a source of income, which again reinforces a story from my childhood, which was we didn't have a lot of money. So there was never enough money. We were always saving money. And, that was playing very heavily in my mind because I had savings, but I knew it wouldn't last forever. And my big thing was, you're going to not make any money. You're going to end up poor, broke, homeless, all of the things that, or massively in debt. All of the things that you've been taught are basically the worst thing that you could possibly go through. And all of that together was rumbling over and over and over again in my mind. And there were definitely days where it felt like it was all I could think about was what was going to happen, what was going to happen. And I even played out the scenario of, what if the school board comes back and they say, nah, you don't get a leave of absence. Now, my colleagues are going to know that I didn't really want to be there.
Oh, yeah. Right? Yes.
And now then I'd be faced with the decision of stay or just outright quit.
Yeah.
Which felt really scary. And I don't even know to this day what decision I would have made. I really don't. Because it felt so monumentally, the leap felt so monumentally huge. So there were a lot of fears on a lot of different levels, mostly around what other people would think of me.
Yeah.
When I made these decisions, and would I fall out of favor with them? Would they laugh at me? Would they talk behind my back? Would they essentially think that I had gone and messed it all up?
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. I think those are so many of the fears that so many people have. You very eloquently went down one by one. It's my family. It's my letting the people down from the school number 1, letting the people down from school number 2, failing, all the above. And I bet that when the people who listen to your podcast and the people who follow you hear that, they're going to be pretty surprised, because you come off as somebody who would never care what somebody else thinks. But that's a process that takes unraveling of that mindset, right? You start with that mindset, but I think a lot of us through the work that we do and just personal development, like you said, masterminds and coaching, was that where you ended up finding the, mental resources to kind of reprogram that story in your head about, okay, what other people think will have any effect on me?
It's been a long, slow process for sure. And it's been a combination of coaching from other people. It's been a combination of learning on my own and unpacking my own beliefs and working on my own awareness and working on my own mindfulness. And I can't say that it's been it wasn't like one course that I took for 6 weeks and then I was an expert at it, because it's still stuff that I come up against. And if you have these really deep-seated stories from childhood or an event that happened to you and it really shapes your worldview, I'm not, for me personally, sure that I will ever be rid of those, monkey mind voices that say, bring up hey, remember, you're really scared about money, or, what are people aren't going to like you. I think that over time and with practice, those voices get quieter and quieter. But I also know that this comes up with fearlessness. People think, well, you're so fearless, you're not afraid of anything. And I just tell them, I'm afraid of so many things. The skill that I have developed and I continue to work on is moving forward and taking action despite being fearful.
Yes.
And I think it goes the same for all of these self-limiting beliefs or the stories that we have. For me, it's not that I don't ever care what people think, because I still care what people think. And I think there is value in staying open enough to people's point of view and even criticism. This is an area I really struggle with, but in staying open to criticism or feedback, staying open to what other people think, because my point of view and perspective is only one. So I'm constantly juggling being self-assured in what I know is right for me, and then also remaining open to hearing other perspectives. It's really hard. And so when these things come up, for me, it's not that I don't ever have a fear of lack of money, because I still do. But I am able to recognize and have awareness now of when that story is cropping up for me, how it's playing out in my decisions, trying to stop myself and redirect, and then ultimately continue to take action despite having sometimes these voices, these narratives, whatever it is, come up in my life. And so it's not that I am, I don't give a crap about what anybody else thinks, or I'm 100% self-assured. It's just that I'm working on the awareness piece of being able to tease apart what's going on or look at it more objectively instead of getting lost in that story. So again, work in progress, and I have setbacks all the time, just like everybody else, but it's through that process of working on it and developing the skills to continue taking action and moving forward. And I think there are completely valid times where stopping and pausing is wonderful, but ultimately continuing to move forward despite your fears, despite the things that people are going to say or you think they're going to say. And all of that has really, really been impactful for me.
That's really valuable. I love how you brought up, it isn't that we should never care what anybody thinks in our life. There's definitely a time and place for input from other people. And if we never cared what anybody thought, we could walk around being rude to everybody. That's not the goal in life, right? But I think when it comes to what you were talking about, it's like, if I'm going to make a decision that's going to impact pretty much only me. At this point, you didn't have a family, right? You were at least at least you don't have kids. I don't know where you were in the marriage, but back when you were making when you're making the decision. But like, for example, in my own life, if I'm making a career decision, it just impacts me. And so somebody who might see me once a month, what they're gonna may or may not think about my quit is really not going to impact me in any way whatsoever. And that's the situation where I think that it's good to make that distinction between when you care about what people think and when you don't. Like if they're just judging something that is really only impacting you, it has no impact on their lives whatsoever. And even then, you can be open to feedback, but then you do what I think you said is realize that feedback is coming from their own lens. And you're doing something pretty brave. And like my friend Jason Goldberg says, a lot of people who may question your quit are either projecting or protecting, neither of which are your problem, right? So you can say, yeah, I appreciate that input and be open to that input. If they say, oh, I think this is scary, but then realize that at the end of the day, what they think about it and what they think is scary is not what you necessarily find scary and what's going to be best for you. And I think, so for anybody out there, it's not like, okay, never care what anybody else thinks. But when you're making decisions that impact your life only, then it's a pretty good time to realize that what they think is generally less important than how you feel.
Yeah. And the other thing that I really was sort of a wake-up call for me, and I first learned this through Byron Katie, although there are many people who talk about variations of this, I think even back to the Stoics, because let's face it, most mindset stuff starts with the Stoics. So this is thousands of years that we've been wrestling with the same things, is that when I start worrying about all of the things that other people are thinking about me or going to say about me and taking on that burden, that is a huge burden for me to then take responsibility for that stuff. And how much energy do I have to carry the burden of, or the micromanagement of what you're going to think about me, right? So if I showed up to your house and, I'm wearing this, I like agonize over what I'm going to wear or whatever. I mean, I'm essentially carrying the burden of, what's Lynn Marie going to think about what my shirt says about me today? Or, is this whatever? It's just, and that's just a trivial example really, but so many of these big decisions, we're really focused on micromanaging other people's reactions to what we're doing. And it's so tiring. Like it's a really hard place to be. And again, I think because we have that negativity bias as humans, that's just part of it. But again, being able to kind of disengage and step away from your own situation and look at it objectively, that was really key for me.
Ooh, that's so good. Absolutely. It's like worrying about the things you have no control over. You have no control over how they're going to perceive this. So why expend the energy to worry or let what you can't control affect you in some negative way? So well put. Steph, where can people find you? I know you have a new book out or it's coming out soon. Please tell everybody where they can find you and find the book.
Sure. You can find everything I'm doing pretty much at my website, which is stephgaudreau.com. And there you can find links to the book, which is called The Core Four. I have a podcast called Harder to Kill Radio that comes out a couple times a week, and I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find those links through my website.
Very cool. Thank you so much for joining us today, Steph.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, for everybody else out there, until next time, happy quitting.